AFL Indigenous round is named after Sir Doug Nicholls. So let's find out a little bit more about the man.
This story should be told because it's one of the greatest stories, not only just Australia, but it's one of the greatest stories of the world.
Not many men have done what he has done over 82 years.
It was everything a footballer should be. He was perfect.
Dad was born in Cumragunja Mission, which is in New South Wales, and he was the youngest of 6. He was born in 1906 and he lived on Cumragunja for many years.
When he's born, he's moved into that transition period where the tribal people are disappearing. We got the land taken off us and we got the Bible and we got churches where that was the school part.
He only went to school like grade 3 or 4.
People did it hard, you know.
Sir Douglas Ralph Nicholls returns to his birthplace. The Cumragunja station has changed since he left it in 1929 to seek his fortune playing Australian rules football in Melbourne. He remembers the white man taking Aboriginal women and children away in an attempt, he claims, to disunify his people.
This policy of taking our girls from the mission, they just came in and ruthlessly threw our girls into their cars. And the mothers hung to them, and I can see my mother hanging to my sister. 16-year-old, they threw her into the car, and here am I with a crowbar.
She ends up at Cootamundra Children's Home, then gets put out as a domestic to Sydney, comes back pregnant, and she dies aged 26.
It does make me feel really sad within myself when I hear about stolen generations and what happened to Dad, the feeling that he must have had.
Were you very bitter towards the white population when
Very
you were
bitter. It was instilled upon us.
You can understand why he would be bitter. There's sometimes you shouldn't hold grudges, but sometimes you should. The atrocities that happen, and I'm no expert, I'm not going to necessarily get into that. I'm just responding to what I've just seen. Just imagine that if that was your family, that was your daughter that was taken away. That's the only thing I think I can react to in terms of this, but you can't blame them for being a little bit bitter and angry.
Very bitter.
That was one of the things that drove grandfather in trying to do the right thing by everybody.
As a youth, Sir Douglas was uneducated and illiterate. He fought his way up in the white world with the only weapon he knew, a prowess in sport.
And over yonder, there's the football ground where I learned football, still playing up bare feet. I was captain of the school team. We went out.
Sport was very important to you, wasn't it?
Most important thing to most of us.
Most of them couldn't afford boots, so they played out in the paddocks of Cumragunja.
Kicked the balls around here and with his, the other boys.
He was very talented in sport. He used to also follow Fitzroy, as we all did as children.
He played with Cumragunja football teams here. There was 3 sides. And then when he left Cumragunja, he went to play with a football team called Tongalo, which was in the Goulburn Valley League.
And the farmers around here, they helped him to get to Melbourne because he wanted to play football.
I think Melbourne was one of those things that was a bit of an adventure for young fellas, and he wanted to play top football, and he was a bloody good player.
It sounds very similar to a lot of similar stories where you're from the villages, or you're from a less populated area, for example, and the lights of the big city are alluring, aren't they? And it almost seems like this. He was desperate to play because he loved it, and Melbourne was the place to be to play it at a high level.
He actually acquired a job with the Northcote Football Club and became a curator. He was then approached by Carlton to come and play football with them.
Were you worried about your colour at all
Not
when
at
you
all.
started
No,
playing?
never conscious of my colour. I felt that I was their equal. And this helped me too.
This is the sad part about this with Carlton. He asked to be rubbed down. No, we're not going to rub you down because you stink.
Yeah.
I, as a young kid, hearing that story growing up, horrified.
They were my first racist stories. I straight away built myself this shield of armour that I wasn't going to allow anyone make me sad or make me angry like that.
This isn't just a Aboriginal problem, is it? It's not just that. You get that. You were getting this in England, in the UK, with people like Africans coming over, Indians coming over, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis. You were getting this racial abuse at very similar situations like this, where a white person wouldn't want to touch a coloured person, and obviously it's complete nonsense, it's complete ignorance. But it's not just an Aboriginal white person Australia situation, is it? This is happening even still around the world, and it's ridiculous.
Dad carried that for a long time, hardly spoke about it. And now at Carlton, we have people in that club who have been thinking about what happened to Dad. So they want to do something about it. And I think, that is so good that they're going to come out and acknowledge that.
What sort of balances it out is what grandfather said. To get a tune out of a piano, you can play the white notes and you can play the black notes, but to get harmony, you got to play both. And that was reference to, reconciliation probably for the first time. It was about working with people. And so he worked through those racism things. And then he ends up at Northcote and Fitzroy.
I was a bad loser. I always wanted to be on top. Same with football. I went for the ball. I want to be on top. I was good. I want to be good, dominating my mind that I was their equal.
Past the Nicholls' early days in Melbourne, it was sport that earned him enough money to live. He was a champion runner, and he decided to become a professional sportsman. In 1929, he joined Jimmy Sharman's boxing troupe.
Running, boxing, football, champion and everything.
All at the one time is totally mind-blowing for me.
There are people like that, though. There are people like that are just brilliant at every sport they put their hands to. And I would love if I was one of them, and I'm not. But yeah, I've got the competitive streak, but there are people that are just good at all sports, aren't they?
He played with Northcote in the VFA. From there, he then went down to Fitzroy. He was the only Aboriginal player playing in the VFL at that time. He took the media by storm as well. They couldn't believe their eyes in terms of how fast he was. He played 52 games and played in the same era as Aidan Bunton.
And I remember him saying this particular story. He was in the rooms on his own.
Aidan was taken back by why was he sitting in the opposite end of the change rooms when all the other players were getting dressed.
That feeling must have come across him again, that I'm not going to be accepted here.
Aidan approached him and said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Well, it's like I'm black and I don't fit in with the other players like that."
From that game, Hayden Bunton, he befriended Dad and they became good buddies.
Yeah. To go over and sit with my grandfather when he was sitting there by himself getting ready, it's quite a beautiful image.
And I suppose at that time as well, for him to do that, you have to be quite brave as well, I think, because you're going against the norm, you're going against the ignorance, and you're almost putting yourself up for having abuse, for taking abuse, because you are doing what the others aren't doing, and you are sticking up for what's right, So I think it's still a brave thing for the other guy to do.
We were always known as the family club. My father played with Sir Doug in the 30s. He was an outstanding footballer, 5'2", was knee-high to a grasshopper, really. Mm-hmm. But he succeeded at the highest level, and he was the one Aboriginal person, just so inspirational to all Aboriginal players. It would have hurt him at different times, racism, but he had the strength and courage to overcome those things.
In one game against Richmond, Jack Dyer must have been running past him and given him a swipe and said, "Out of the way, nigger." That didn't go down too well with grandfather, but he basically held it in until he got picked in the Victorian team to represent Victoria in Western Australia. And he was on the train, and obviously Jack Dyer was also selected. And Jack Dyer came into his carriage. Grandfather apparently said he wasn't happy with him. Words to that effect. He might have been a bit stronger than that. And then Jack sat down with him and apologised. So we have no beef with Richmond.
Wow.
He loved football, but he got the message across, the Christian message across too.
The Aboriginal Mission Church at Fitzroy in Melbourne has come to cater for all. Its pastor is an Aborigine, Pastor Doug Nicholls, whose philosophy is that every man must make a contribution to the community.
Later on in life, Dad decided that he wanted to take up the church.
We belonged to a great family of God, and he had made out of one blood all nations of men.
The way that he preached was so good.
It makes me question things a little bit, because Catholicism was forced upon the Aboriginals. The Aboriginals would have had their own beliefs, whether or not they had their own religions or whatever, they had their own beliefs. And Catholicism was forced upon them by the Brits, by the white man. And it puzzles me that it ends up like this. The preachers managed to do their job. And clearly the Aboriginals started taking up Catholicism. And I don't understand how and why, if you possibly had your own beliefs for so long beforehand. I don't understand how that really works, but clearly it did.
That's where Dad really started to get involved in Aboriginal affairs.
He was always politically thinking. He was involved in everything that was going to help our people. We had this one soldier who fought for us, and they knew who that soldier was, and it was Dad.
On the 27th of May 1967, more than 90% of Australians voted in support of counting Aboriginal people in the census. Pastor Doug Nicholls was instrumental in lobbying for the referendum.
We're appealing to the public to support us in a yes vote.
The Nicholls family travelled the country, drumming up support for reform.
Mum and Dad worked so hard. We forget about the women at times, but Mum was the person behind Dad.
He might have been the chairman, but Nan was the CEO.
Behind every great man, there is an even greater woman. Right? Behind me, not currently, but behind me, I have Charlie. And that's so true. How often is the man in the spotlight, but you've got the rock behind, who is the wife? How often is that?
People would come from everywhere, just come up and shake Dad's hand.
As soon as that hit your hand, that was it. You were safe, you knew you were there with a man of culture, man of God, and that was really important to people, whether you're young or whether you're old.
With his sons, Ralph and Bevan, Pastor Nicholls is always a welcome visitor in the dressing room. It's a result few would have envisaged from the young man who came to Melbourne in 1926 and had to sleep in the markets. He's proud that last year he was named Father of the Year.
That was such a surprise.
Father of the Year?
An Aboriginal family, an Aboriginal person winning Father of the Year.
So I know he wanted a lot for us when we were children. He thought I was going to be a doctor, if you don't mind.
He was also the King of Moomba. He was knighted by the Queen of England.
The only footballer night.
He also had an audience with the Pope. How many people, non-Aboriginal or Aboriginal people, have met the Pope?
And then he was...
Papa Mamas. Papa Mamas is the head man of all tribes in Australia.
I get very emotional about it. Coming from Camera and then becoming Governor of South Australia, no one would ever dream of an Aboriginal person would become Governor of a state.
As appointed Governor of South Australia, it's a great honour, not only for Lady Nicholls and I, but for the Aboriginal people of Australia.
I recently was in Adelaide, Governor, himself took me on a tour of Government House and explained to me how much respect he had for my grandfather. And funnily enough, I told him that this hallway that you're walking me on right now, me and my cousin used to play football along here. And that brought a smile to his face. And walking around Adelaide, memories started coming back, and I was telling people that I used to kick around this town in a Rolls Royce. How did you get around?
Sir Douglas has a deep pride in his Aboriginal heritage. He built this monument, and the words on it are his.
To the memories of our beloved people, pioneers of that mission. Today we walk in the footsteps, as it were, of those great people.
I get infused with the spirits of this country. This is our bloodline. This is our tree. This is how I'm connected.
All that Yorta country is your home. That's where your traditions are and your customs and your ancestors' DNA's all over that country.
Sir Douglas Nicholls ends his journey here, where it all began, on the banks of the Murray.
Mum and Dad are both buried at Cumra.
Every day of my life I think of Dad. I wish he was still here. I sometimes think he is here with us, with me.
Even though he's not here with us physically, he's still here spiritually.
He said, I'm going home. I can smell the gum leaves. And he's at peace here.
But we used to sit around here and probably bring our lunch here and sit down and have a tea just for get by the running stream and these gum trees. It means so much to us, you know.
I'm very proud to be the grandson of Pastor Sir Douglas Nicholls. His legacy for me is great integrity, compassion, fair go, mateship, human rights, civil rights, spirituality, identity, culture, a place in the earth. That's what he's given me.
Would you have been so well known and a spokesman for the Aboriginal people if you hadn't been a famous footballer?
This is one of the good things. I made a lot of friends to sport, which has no barrier.
He had that vision about football opening doors. It opened doors for him, it opened doors for my son. Nathan Lovett Murray played footy for Essendon Footy Club.
The thing that really inspires me, 5'2", a little man walking amongst giants, trying to change the attitudes of people. Has it made a difference? Well, he has made a difference.
We had that saying about, how can we soar like eagles when you feed us like chooks? And so he knew from the start, from, virtually in the early days when he saw his sister taken away, he met injustices head on.
This round that's going to be named in Pastor Sir Douglas Nicholls' name is a great honour.
Our father, grandfather, uncle.
It honours all our people, as well as him and his family.
Oh, I'm getting emotional.
More than proud. I wish there was another word.
Everybody was proud of it.
There has to be another word that covers all those words, and I don't know it. But if somebody out there knew it, I wish they'd ring and tell me what it is. It was everything a footballer should be. He was perfect.
There you go. The Sir Doug Nicholls round. I'm sure people know more about him than I do. I've just learnt about him from this video. What I would say is, I like that they've spoken about how football has opened doors. And I think, would he have done or been able to do what he did without being a successful footballer? Probably not. At least not anywhere near to the extent that he was able to after being a footballer. But he was clearly a good person, right? He was clearly a good person. He had the ability which allowed him to reach great heights. But after then, it's what you do after that especially, isn't it? And whether or not I agree with the route that he took, what he did was great, right? He gave indigenous people the rights, or certainly more rights, and made their lives better, and tried making everyone inclusive of each other. There is no point of continuously fighting and arguing, because everyone's got to live together. The stories about the adversities that he had to deal with when playing football, and I think maybe the best way of summing it up was he was the bigger man, not physically, but he was the bigger man, and he didn't let any racial issues. Not that it didn't get him down, but he didn't let it beat him. And I think that's big for everyone. A fantastic story. Really, really interesting to learn about Sir Doug Nicholls. Let's hope his legacy continues, as I'm sure it will, especially that obviously a round of AFL has now been named after him. And that will always keep his name there in the forefront. Really, really interesting. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully you've learned something new that you may not have known. Make sure you please like and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.